Hello, and welcome to another episode of Tea, Tentacles, and Talk, cozy conversations about LGBTQ plus romance. I'm your host, Chloe Archer, and today I have another fabulous guest with me. Let me take a moment to introduce Harper Robson. Harper grew up dreaming of being a writer. Didn't we all? But that didn't work out until she was in her 40s. Oh my God, same girl. Along the way, she worked in oil and gas marketing, software development, and spent more than a decade as a stay-at-home mom. True Pacific Northwesterner, Harper loves the rain, so when her family decided to move to Southern California in 2023, she was sure she'd miss the cozy gray winters of Seattle and Vancouver. However, it turns out that a daily dose of sunshine and palm trees isn't too hard to get used to, and San Diego feels more like home all the time. She's mom to two teen boys and an adorable but naughty yellow lab who I saw in the background. Her husband works in the tech industry and he makes her laugh every single day. Harper's favorite things include weekends with her besties, the Seattle Kraken, her dogs, and drinking champagne for no reason at all. Welcome, Harper. Thank you so
Hi,
much for
Chloe.
coming.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So are you a Canadian or did you just happen to live in Vancouver for a while?
No, I'm a Canadian, born and bred.
Mm,
Yep.
okay.
I was born in Ontario, in
Oh,
Ottawa,
okay.
actually.
Oh,
And
okay.
then, but grew up mostly around Vancouver, like in the suburbs, and
Yeah.
then lived in Calgary for a while, and I'm kind of all over,
Hmm.
but I'm definitely more of a West Coast girl.
Yeah, sure, sure. Yeah, I have a brother who lives in Vancouver. So our family is like, well, we're kind of like half Canadian, half US, and like a whole bunch of British. And
Yeah, that's
on
kind
my
of how we
dad's
are too. I
side,
mean, I'm the American contingent in our family, but because I have dual
right.
citizenship now, but like there's a bunch of
Right.
Brits, there's a bunch of Canadians, and it's
Yeah.
sort of, yeah.
Yeah, I was born in Montreal.
Oh, yeah.
Lived in Ontario, Northern Ontario, for a number of years. Went to McGill for undergrad
Oh,
in
right.
Quebec,
Okay, cool.
but have lived like, I mean, I've been in the States for like the last 20 some years. But
Yeah.
I lived in Scotland for a while. I lived in Japan.
Oh,
Like, so
cool.
I've, a bunch of different, so I kind of consider myself like a citizen of the world, but I lived in Southern California for all 4 years of high school. So
Oh, I think we talked about this. Yeah, really
yes,
close to
yes.
me.
So I
Yeah.
lived in Orange County, kind of like
Right.
Mission Viejo area. Yeah.
Right.
I used to love to go to like Laguna Beach. And I've
Oh,
been to San Diego a number of times because I was that nerd. I used to go to San Diego Comic-Con a lot
right.
way
Back
back
in
in
the
the day.
day. Yeah.
Yeah, before it became as huge as it is now and like as
Right.
multimedia as it is now, when it was a lot more comics centric.
Right.
But yeah, and I still have like a bunch of friends and folks out there. So, and my parents are in Arizona at the moment, so I get kind of out there when I can.
You're out here. Yeah.
Yeah, but definitely I would say like Southern California for me is like very different now than it was in the 90s when I lived there.
Oh, really?
Changed a lot. Oh yeah. I mean it's bigger, it's like more overpopulated even.
There's so many
Like
people here. Yeah. There's
yeah.
so many people. Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of intense, but yeah, no, that's really cool. And I have a brother who lives in Santa Barbara actually. So like I
Oh,
mean
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we're all spread out all over.
Everywhere. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's just kind of how we roll. But well,
Right.
I'm so excited to have you come to the show. Harper and I got to kind of meet face to face at the Northern Rainbow Romance Retreat
Yeah.
in Ontario back in, was it October? My God.
August? No, was it? Yeah,
It was
October. You're right.
October.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I was pretty sure. It was fall. But
Yeah. Yes.
so I've been wanting to have her come on the show for a while. So I'm really excited to talk with you a little bit about your work and all of that kind of stuff in your latest release, which we'll get to. But you mentioned in your bio that you've always wanted to write. Can you kind of tell us a little bit about your author journey, as they like to say?
Yeah. So I was that kid who read all the time. I was always reading. Um, my mom was a teacher, and so she tells the story about how I was reading like at 3, I kind of taught myself to read, sort of.
Oh, wow.
And so I was reading, like labels on boxes and things, and the neighborhood ladies would be like, "Oh, you coached her to do that." My mother was like, "No, I didn't. She's just figured it out." So, but yeah, I was a reader, always was a reader,
Mm.
and like I was reading romance novels before my mother would have wanted me to read romance
Weren't
novels. I
we
was
all? No.
sneaking them off the shelf, but yeah. Um, and so always wanted to do that. And then, you get older and you start thinking, oh, I can't make money as an author. Like that's not, so I went to university and did, I did just a general arts degree, but ended up, life brings you weird paths. And I ended up
Ah,
getting into natural gas marketing, which is something that I never would have been interested in at all, but it was
yeah.
fun while I did it. It was, I mean, I was in my early 20s, and so there was a lot of money. It was in the 90s, and so
Oh, sure.
there was lots of money, and I lived in Calgary for a while, and there's oil and gas,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Yeah,
oil and
it's the
gas in
Texas of
Alberta.
Canada. Yeah.
That's right. Um, so, I had lots of fun and then ended up moving back out to Vancouver where I grew up because I missed the ocean,
Yeah.
missed the coast, and moved back out and ended up, along the way, ended up getting into software development for a while. And but I was doing more HR stuff
Oh,
um,
sure.
in game development and met my husband and we got married. And then through no planning whatsoever, I ended up losing my job right around the time that I got pregnant. And
Mm,
in Canada, you get a full year of maternity
yes.
leave. And
Mm-hmm.
so I felt really weird and awkward going out interviewing for jobs and, saying, well, I'll be here, but then I'm having a baby, so then I'm going to be gone for a year.
Yeah,
And
right.
so I didn't end up getting another job. I interviewed, but they're not allowed to not hire you because of that, but I'm sure that
Right.
that fed into it.
Yeah, right.
Like, I'll be
Yeah,
here for 3 months and then I'm going to be gone for a year and you're going to have to do this all over again. So,
right. Right.
so I ended up being at home for a while. We ended up, during that time, we left Vancouver, moved to Seattle, which is
Okay.
where we spent 10 years in Seattle, which I
Oh.
loved.
Mm.
Still miss Seattle, still feel like Seattle is home, really more than anywhere else.
Mm.
Um, and during that time, I stayed home, but met a lot of great friends, and we ended up having another baby, and things just, life just continues. That's just sort of how it goes. And all of a
Yeah.
sudden, you're like, I turned 50, and I was like, what? Wait, what? How did that happen?
I know it's amazing how fast
Right?
it flies
And so
by.
right? It's crazy how it happens.
Yeah.
And so during the pandemic, I had when my kids were really small, I didn't read as much as I had been. I think I
Mm.
was just so
Sure.
wiped out all the time. I just didn't read.
Understandable.
And but then the pandemic happened and we were all of a sudden locked in the house. And so I started reading. And
Mm.
then I ended up joining a Facebook group where I got to know one of the authors. I started reading MM romance, which I had never read before. And people always
Mm.
say, what was the first MM romance you read? I can't even remember. Um, but I met an author through her author group who she was amazing and I started getting to know her and I kind of started thinking, oh, maybe I could write a book of my own. And she was amazing. She was just like, well, yeah, you totally should. And it
Mm-hmm.
was very kind of matter of fact, like,
Yeah.
well, why wouldn't you? If you wanted to do it, why wouldn't you do it?
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think like the opportunities and avenues are so much bigger and broader now than they ever were.
for sure.
For some of the like somewhat older folks like us who when we were young, the only path to publication was traditional publishing.
Right. You had to get an agent and there were these
Yeah,
gatekeepers
it
and
was,
yeah,
oh yeah, I mean, and that's still a viable avenue, but it's incredibly difficult. And the reality is, and especially I think in our current moment, even more so, a lot of these publishers are not interested in LGBTQ plus
totally.
content. And even what is published these days, I found tends to veer a lot toward YA
Yes. Yeah.
I think there are some, there are a few exceptions, Alexis Hall and like some, the red, white, and royal blue,
Right. Casey.
Chris,
Yeah. Yeah.
I think like there are like little tiny inroads that are being made, but it's by no means like a market where agents are like, yes, I'm
Hungry for, yes. Yeah,
and
exactly.
so and I think that there's obviously there are many pros and cons to
Right.
trad and indie, but I love the fact that indie you have so much more control. I'm a tiny bit of a control freak.
I know.
And
I'm the
I do
same.
have some friends who are in trad publishing and like, one of them, I mean, she's amazing, but like, and she's one of those people who's like very well suited for trad publishing in the sense that like she is very willing to change anything about her story based on what the publisher wants, right?
Oh, really?
But like, yeah, so she's like had to change endings, she's had to change like
Oh, wow.
all of these kinds of things. And I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
I would probably have some issues with some, and I mean, I certainly there are many stories of like writers, especially working with LGBTQ stuff, who've been told to like, oh, let's not make this character LGBT.
Right?
Or like, let's, take out this, and so I'm just like, no.
Yeah, that's not giving up that kind of control. I
I
think I would have trouble writing, like I think I would have
Yeah, yeah,
putting
for
together a
sure.
story that wasn't that someone else told me to put together. I,
Right. Yeah, and I mean, also where like for people who are trying to like make a living and stuff, honestly, I feel like indie's a little bit safer, in
totally.
the sense that from what I know, like advances for fiction are little teeny
Tiny.
tiny.
Yeah,
They're, so even if you get like say an $8,000 advance, they'll also break it up into a minimum of two payments. And so like it'll be
right.
like, oh, we'll give you part of it now, and then like 6 months later we'll give you some more, and then maybe a few more months later we'll give you, and like
Right. And
yeah.
that's not enough to live on, like how do you live on?
No.
You can't live on that. Yeah.
Right. And like they don't want you to publish as often either. Like they don't want as many releases.
Oh,
So
really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Like I mean, you can't as a trad author be putting out 4 or 5 books a year.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
They stagger their releases. And like the thing is too is like, I mean, you'd have to get each one bought essentially. And
Right.
if they have for some reason bought a series, and usually they'll only buy the first book, maybe the second, first two,
Right.
but like they won't let you release the second book the same year. Like it's got to be staggered to like balance out with other releases,
With
and
other
they'll
things they're
yeah,
doing.
and they'll
Yeah.
decide when it's going to come out, right? You
Right.
don't have as much. So, I mean, I do think that there are some really great options for like being a hybrid author, like having some
Right.
trad and having some indie. And I've thought about like, oh, I have one idea for something that I'm like, that might be a good trad,
Oh,
maybe
really?
potentially pursue someday.
Right.
But like, that's down the road. But yeah, it is really interesting. But I mean, I think so many people like us when we were growing up, like it just seemed like an impossible barrier.
Yeah, it just wasn't a viable. I mean, yeah,
Yeah.
even when I was really young and, like reading Judy Blume, like I loved Judy
Yeah.
Blume. I read everything she ever wrote. And I just remember, like, I think I wrote her a fan letter at one point, like pen and paper, like put a
Yeah.
stamp
Oh
on
my
it.
God. Love it.
And, and I just remember thinking, wow, I could never do that. I just, that was never something that even entered my mind as a possibility. And
Right.
even now, like just exactly what you were saying, like it just seems like you're giving up so much control and so much of, I don't think, I mean, I'm sure that had not, the world of independent publishing opened up, I'm sure I wouldn't be doing it because
Yeah.
it just seems so overwhelming to seek out an agent and a publisher and then have them tell you exactly what they want rather than,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, I think that for me would probably really kill or inhibit my
I
creativity.
think it would too. And I'm
And
discovering creativity is such a weird thing, and I
Is.
never thought of myself, honestly, never really thought of myself as being particularly creative at all. Because, I always used to think art, like drawing, painting, and I
Yeah,
can't
right.
even put together a stick
Oh,
person.
me either. Me
It's
either.
just
I
not
wish I
even,
could. When I was a child, like,
oh,
because I can visualize things really well. So, like, I remember, like, I had an obsessive phase as a child of drawing dragons. Like, I was
oh,
really into dragons, and like
yeah.
fantasy was my gateway drug genre for
Oh, I
book
love
nerds.
dragons. Yeah.
And like I just like I would have these visual like and I would try to draw them and I would get so frustrated because they'd never
It's
I
so
could
not close to
never
what's in your head. Yeah.
right, right. And I was like, so I was actually pretty young when I came to the sad realization I do not have artistic talent
Right.
in drawing, painting kind of
Yeah.
modality.
I am not an artiste. Yeah.
No, no.
Yeah.
No, I
Yeah, no, I can't. Now I can't remember where I was going with that, but yeah, the dragon. I got off on the dragon. My
right.
ADHD is like, oh, dragons over
I
there.
know.
And now I'm
Dragons are
thinking
always
about
a good
dragons and
to
yeah,
get off track. Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, I think, and also part of it is, I mean, mainstream publishers, and I understand this, they're looking to make money and they
yeah,
want something that they make more conservative decisions because
right,
they want a guarantee on their investment. They want a
right,
return, right? And like, I'm that quirky kind of writer where it's like, yeah, they're not going to want my sci-fi tentacle rom-com,
right.
series,
But your
right? They're
stuff
gonna be
is so
like,
great,
what?
Chloe. Your stuff is so funny. If people
And it's
actually could read it, they would love it, even if
right.
they thought they wouldn't,
Well, I
right?
like to think so. But I mean, it's one of those things where it's like, okay, I know I sort of march to the beat of my own drum. And there are
Right.
people out there who like that, but the thing is, it's very hard sometimes to convince um like the traditional publishing world to like take a
Absolutely.
chance on that kind of stuff. And so
Right.
I think like for at least especially for writers like me, there's so much more creative freedom and leeway to do whatever you want,
Yeah.
really.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
That's what I was going to say about creativity, like it's so it's like this ethereal thing that you like
yeah.
it's so hard to um you'll get this idea but then you'll start it and then something happens. I found this with the last book I was writing. Something
Mm.
happens. I ended up the mistake I made was I got feedback too early, and I have a
Mm.
really like Clifton strength, like empathy, and I have this
Oh,
really strong need. I'm a people pleaser, really, and
okay,
I have this
okay.
really strong need to like keep everybody happy. And
Oh,
so I ended up getting feedback from a couple different
oh
from my
no.
developmental editor and then from a good friend,
Yeah.
and they had really great feedback, but it was kind of different directions, and I froze. I couldn't. It was so crazy. It
Mm.
froze. I just couldn't write for weeks. I couldn't figure it out.
Oh,
And so that was kind of a really interesting, like the creativity, it was gone. And it was kind of weird
yeah.
and terrifying. So I think I learned in that through that, like I kind of need to be in my own sort of little cocoon for a little while. And then once I
Right.
feel like I'm ready, then I can put it out and ask people what they think when the story's more cooked
Mm.
in my head, I think.
Right,
But otherwise, it just kind of
right.
it goes away because I'm like, well, if I do this, well, so and so told me that it would be better if I did this, but then she said this, and I don't know how to make both of those things happen. Like,
No, I know. I mean that I think that brings up the really fascinating topic of process as a writer that I want to talk about. Also, I'm a comparatively newer
me
published
too.
author.
Yeah.
I've only been published about 2.5 years,
Hmm.
and I feel like, especially this last year, I learned a lot about my process that I didn't fully have a grasp on in the first year
Yeah.
writing. And I think, probably I imagine this is a journey where I'll continue to learn stuff along the way, and certain things may change too as I evolve as a writer, but I love to chat with other people to like learn about their process. And
How
I
they do
do
it.
think I'm a big Clifton Strengths like person as well. I'm actually in Becca Syme's like Strengths for Writers class right now.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, and I've never done it before and I'm really excited.
I've
But I
taken
do
some stuff from
think
her. She's amazing. She's just amazing.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I do think that they can kind of like give you insight into like for instance like you said your empathy like why getting feedback too early could be detrimental to your process. So can you kind of walk us through like from idea to publication, like how does your writing process work, or does it seem to vary with every book?
I think I'm still kind of figuring it out. It's really
Mm,
kind of interesting. Like process, like you're saying, it's so interesting to see how everyone does it. And I'm
right.
pretty new as well. I think we must have published around the same time because I
Mm.
about well, probably coming up on 3 years, I guess now, maybe.
Okay.
When did I do it? 2022. Yeah, it was like spring 2022 that I
Okay, I was fall.
where yeah, so around the same time. Yeah. Um, and so that first book, I keep saying every book I write keeps getting harder. Like I think because and my developmental editor, who is so wonderful, but she was just like, well, yeah, because you didn't know anything when you started writing. She's like, you didn't know. You just sat
Yeah,
down and wrote what was in your head. And she's like, now you've
right.
learned all this stuff and you're trying to like follow these rules, and it's so much harder. But yeah,
Mhm.
the first book, I just sat down and just I didn't have an outline. I just kind of
Yeah.
knew these characters because they'd been kind of walking around in my head for a long time.
Sure.
And sat down and wrote. And I mean, that
Mm.
book was kind of a gong show at first. I had so many revisions to do, but I found these I got really lucky and I found a developmental editor who I just think is amazing and a
Mm.
copy editor who is also amazing.
Mhm.
And they made that book just I still look at it now, even though it was only a couple of years ago, and go, "Ooh, I would have done things so differently now." But
Right.
for a first go around, I feel like, that was okay, you know?
Yeah.
But yeah, so when I sit down, I always have the characters first. That's
Yes,
kind of
me too.
really character driven. And I think for romance, I feel like that's like the whole thing because everyone knows how it's going to turn out in the end. You might not know how they're going to get there, but it has to be a happy ending. So,
Right.
so the
Mhm.
characters, so I always have the characters, and I have this neat tool. Um, it's online, so it's called One Stop for Writers, and
Oh,
there's a character builder tool in it. And
oh, neat.
I think it's an annual subscription, but I think it's only like 25 or $30 for the
Okay.
year.
Yeah.
But they're the same people that write. Have you ever seen those that like the emotion thesaurus?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. The
Yeah.
Ackerman and
Yes.
Bluesky. Yeah.
Yes.
Hmm.
So they have a website called One Stop for Writers, and it's a
Oh,
really
yes, yes.
um there's a character builder in there, and it takes you through, like, you answer a bunch
Mm.
of questions, and it's quite extensive. But I usually do that for all my characters, and so I know them pretty well. Um and then the first couple of books, honestly, I couldn't even tell you where the ideas came from. They just kind of came, and it was weird. Um but so I'll sit down with the characters. I'll do the characters first, get their backgrounds. And then I find I have trouble sometimes figuring out the conflict. People, that's what my editor says.
Oh,
Where's the
sure.
conflict? I just like to write low angst. Everybody's happy.
Right,
They
right.
have a little tiff and then they get back together because everyone's reasonable and they talk about things, and that's nobody wants to read about that. So,
Right. Oh, hold on here. We've
oh,
got
look at.
wants to say hi.
Oh.
Hi, this is Jasper.
Oh, hi, Jasper.
He
Oh, he
likes
is
to
so
make
cute.
appearances and he's just sort of like, oh, it's time for my close-up.
Oh, he is
Hey,
so cute.
yeah.
Buddy.
He's a feisty little Yorkie.
Oh my God, he is
Yes.
adorable.
He thinks he is, oh, sleepy. He thinks he is like a big Doberman and is like
Right?
very
Little
serious
dog syndrome. Yeah.
guarding me in the house. His brother, I have another Yorkie, Teddy, and he's bigger than Jasper, but
Oh,
he's like the biggest weenie ever. It's like Jasper is the boss, like Jasper is the defender,
the
Teddy's
alpha
the
dog. Yes.
hide behind mom kind of thing.
Yeah.
Okay, you're done. All right, there we go. Um, um, yeah,
Where
so
was
I mean, I feel like the writing process is, I mean, it's so fascinating. So are you, so you sort of said like that the first characters like they kind of come to you in your head. But are you now somebody who's kind of like, oh, I like do really developed like character charting and like within this system, right? And then also like plotting out, like have you become more of a plotter
I
than from
have.
the first book? Okay.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's changing too.
Hmm.
I've become much more of a plotter. So, and I still feel like I if I have too much of it plotted out, I think I get bored. And then it's a weird balance and I'm still figuring it out. But
Mhm.
I think if I know exactly all the little things that are going to happen, I get bored and I don't want to write it.
Me
I
too.
lose interest. But I do feel like if I have the general direction, it's a lot easier.
Yeah.
Um, but sometimes it doesn't always happen that way. And sometimes just sitting down and just writing actually
Yeah.
will help you figure it out, which is so
Oh yeah.
weird. I mean, it really is just the weirdest. Creativity and writing is just the weirdest thing. Like
It
it's
is, and like, for aspiring or new authors who might be watching, I think the important thing to know is that it's different for every person,
yeah.
right?
And it will change
So,
too. I mean, I really think,
yeah.
it will change because I have trouble remembering details, of things that I've done before. And,
Oh, yeah.
um, there's tools out there that you can find, where you can keep track of things
Right.
and that I find that to be really helpful
I
to
am not that organized. I wish
I
I
am not either. But there is a really neat, there's a software program where they have it's like a codex. And so the software, the writing program that I use is you can use AI with it. So
Okay.
some people might not like that. And I don't use that function, but you can use it without the AI. But one of the things that you can do with it is it has this codex. And
Oh,
so you can put all your detail, all your characters, all your locations,
yeah.
into this codex. And so you can
Oh,
actually, within what you're writing, you can call it up. And so it will then pop up with, oh,
oh,
this is
neat.
what I said, his eyes were blue, or whatever
Okay.
it was. It's really kind of interesting. And I feel like that's a cool thing. So you can use these like tools
Cool.
without having
Well,
to,
there's so many out there now,
yeah,
like
use
help
the,
with the process. So, I mean,
yeah,
this is the Chloe word of advice of the day that, there's nothing holding you back from writing
right?
a book today,
That's
and
right.
publish. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Yeah, so I mean, I think, we've talked a lot about like really the ability to do this now is so much more possible. And I would say, especially given both of our experience, don't let age hold you back either. Uh,
Totally.
and there have been, I think obviously one of the really high profile, excuse me, in our genre sort of success stories was like Lucy Lennox,
Oh yeah.
who also didn't publish until she was, I believe, 42 or something like
Yeah, I think
that.
so. Yeah.
And, and she's like a big superstar in
I
our
know. I
field.
know. I
And
want to be
so,
Lucy when I grow up. And I think I might
right.
actually be older than Lucy. I'm not sure, but
Well, she's delightful. But, I mean, a lot of other people, I mean, I believe Nora Phoenix was a little bit older too when she
yep.
sort of started. And, and sometimes depending on like the cycles of your life and the things that you're doing, right?
Yep.
You know, and sometimes sometimes you do need a kind of what I like to call a cosmic kick in the butt to to do things right. Like I'd been attending actually GRL as a reader for like about 9 years before
Oh
I
wow. Oh,
actually
that's so
got
cool.
published. But I remember the very first GRL I went to, which was in Chicago. God, I don't know, 2013 or 14,
Oh
something
wow, that's so cool.
long time ago. And I remember going and I was just like, oh, I want to do this one day, right? Like,
Right.
I always knew I wanted to be a writer. I'd written some stuff before. I wrote a really bad urban fantasy novel when I was like 21, and like, stuff like that. But I hadn't really done a lot of creative writing for a good number of years. And I don't know, I think I kind of felt blocked and I had other stuff going on with my career, my day job, and all of that kind of stuff. And I
Yeah.
continually kind of make excuses about like, well, one day, right? And then
Right.
as time passes so fast, but it was really the pandemic for me that was like a
Yeah.
big I mean, I think like a lot of people, we were having like, with all this lockdown time, you've got time for existential questioning, right?
Totally.
Doing with my life, and and then like I also had like a couple of things happen that I think really pushed me. One was kind of sadder, which was that, a family member that I was really close with, my aunt, passed away unexpectedly.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And it was like she was only 57, freak accident,
Oh,
some stairs, kind of thing. And it was one of those like, oh gosh, maybe won't have time
right.
later, right? And it really made me think like, I don't want to regret that I didn't do this.
Not doing something. Hmm.
And then at the same time, I was on the public service loan forgiveness program, and
Right.
the remainder of my loans, I'd paid on them for 10 plus years. They got
Hmm.
forgiven. And I don't know what it was, but like when that weight of the albatross was
Yes.
removed, like it
Lifted.
opened, like the creative floodgates kind of opened. And then I was just like, no more waiting. Like, I need to do this now.
Right.
Like, I haven't looked back. And so, I mean, everybody's different in terms of like what it takes to get you there. And, but I would say, like, really think about, do you want to have regrets that you didn't do this thing, right? That
Right.
you didn't try this thing.
I know. It's
Because,
so,
yeah,
I can't remember who said it, but I wasn't there's someone that said, you'll never regret things that you did, but you will regret things that you didn't.
exactly. 100%. Yeah, I do believe that. And,
Yeah, I do too.
that like not every book is going to be a success. Not, very few people out the gate are like having a bestseller and earning
Right?
thousands of dollars or more. Like
Yep.
it is a journey, but if it's something you're really passionate about, then,
Yeah.
you can make it your own,
You
which
can make it, yeah, you can make it work. And and you can make a good living. You
yeah,
can make a good living. And I'm not there yet, 2.5 years in, I'm making some, but I'm not, I wouldn't be able to support the family.
right.
Um, but
Yeah.
I'd like to get there, and
Oh yeah.
feel like I feel like there's the possibility because a lot
Uh,
of people are doing it, even people that you've never heard of, but they're
right.
making, you
Yeah.
can support your middle class lifestyle
I
and you get to do what you love. And
yeah.
I think that
Or,
that's
I mean, like, I think there are plenty of us who, like, you can still keep your day job and do this
right.
and, like, add to your retirement. Or my goal is to
Absolutely.
retire earlier
Right.
than planned, right? So, like,
Yep.
I still have my day job. I'm definitely not making enough money at this to replace what I earn
Right.
from my day job yet, but it is like enabling me to think about earlier retirement and,
Totally.
things like that. And I would love to do that. But even if it doesn't happen the way that I would like, I'm still going to keep doing it. And it's still
Right.
some extra money in my pocket, which I'm really happy to have. I mean, I think the thing, I have talked to a lot of full-time authors on here. And it is really interesting because, like, of course, when I first started out, I was like, oh yeah, that's exactly what I'm aiming for. Um, and now I feel like I'm a little bit more cautious about it in the sense that there's a lot of extra pressure that comes with going full time,
Yes.
far more pressure on like your release schedule, on each
Hmm.
book being successful to a certain
Right.
degree, and when you're relying on that to pay your bills. And then of course like the what if something happens with your Amazon account, or
That's the
and
terrifying thing
there's
right now
just
too. Hmm.
right, and I
Yeah.
mean that can happen to anyone, and it's like, okay, well,
Yep.
as stressful as it is, as long as I'm not like relying on it to pay my
Right.
mortgage, right? Then it's like,
Right.
okay, I can kind of deal with this. So, for me, and also because like I am single, I don't have somebody else who has an income in the
Right.
household. And I also like I get health insurance and benefits like through my work
Through
that I
work.
use. And so
Yep.
that's also why like if I ever go full time, I will be moving abroad, where I, can get
Right.
health care and not go bankrupt, trying to, get
Right.
medical care if I'm self-employed, basically, as a
Yeah, and that's a big thing. So we had, that, and it impacts creativity too.
it
Is there,
does.
because
Yeah.
we had shortly after we moved to California.
Hmm.
So my husband during the pandemic, I mean, he's been in the tech industry for, oh, how old are we? So, almost 30 years he's been
Okay.
in
Yeah.
big tech, and he was caught in the one round of layoffs and then was
Right.
employed again. And then just right after we moved to California, we were here 6 weeks and he was laid off again.
Oh,
And so, and with everything going on in the world of tech right now, it's a bit of a bloodbath. And
yes.
he's been looking for work now for a while, like over a year. And so, we're fortunate in that, tech paid enough that we have a nest egg, and we also, there's good things and bad things, but we had made this move to California, and we temporarily were going to stay with my husband's parents while we got here and found a house and all the rest of it. And well, we're still here.
Yeah,
Our in-laws.
yeah,
And there's good things and bad things about it, but
sure.
we, very fortunately are not in a position where, we're not going to lose a home or something.
Right,
So,
right. Yeah.
but when that happened, when he lost his job and it became apparent that he wasn't going to find another one in a month the way he's always been able to do in the past,
Yeah.
um, I was like, oh well, I'll just pick up and write more, and that'll bring in more money. And I knew
Mhm.
I wouldn't be able to replace his salary, but
Right.
and the all of a sudden the pressure was just, and I think that's something even still a year and a half later, I still kind of struggle with,
Mm,
this has to make money, this has to make money,
I
which is really interesting. So I feel like, when he does eventually get another job and go back to work, I'm curious to see almost from like an outside perspective of, I wonder if I'll find it easier to, like, will
yeah.
more ideas come because that pressure will be gone.
Hmm.
And so it's a really, really interesting, our
Well,
our minds are so impacted by everything around us that we just
I
don't even know.
yeah, I think that it speaks to the fact that psychology and mindset are such a huge part of
Enormous.
being a
Yeah.
writer, that more so than I thought when I first started.
Right. And I
And
really have always believed that your mind is really important, but it's
yes,
it's much more so than I would have even thought.
right, right. And I mean, I have definitely seen, just from the folks that I've interviewed, full-time people higher rates of burnout. Uh,
Right?
in
Because that
terms,
pressure is so
again,
intense.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And it is a market, and depending on what you're writing, and especially in kind of like more saturated areas like contemporary, right? For
Yeah.
instance, you have to be releasing with a certain degree of frequency to stay on people's radars, right?
Right?
And so, yeah, so I'm like, oh, well, I don't want to hit burnout, because that would not be good. But
No.
I mean, I think, and like the folks that I've talked to about that have been really candid, and like some of it's a very long, sometimes multi-year process to come back from
To get
burnout.
out of it. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so it's like, oh, okay, like I learned a lot of life lessons from some of these
Totally.
conversations. But like on the flip side, kind of you were talking about sort of feedback. I've also seen, like, I know a number of authors who get like taken to a standstill when like they struggle with the feedback side of things. Like they get a bad review and they make the mistake of reading it, and it like stops them from being able to do stuff. And
Yeah. Absolutely.
so I mean, part of it, I do think, like going into this, like you have to do a lot of self-reflection,
Yeah.
self-honest self-reflection, and
Right?
assessment to like really learn, like, okay, can I actually read my reviews? And
Mm-hmm.
do I need to stay away from, like, what are the things that are going to like inhibit me as an author?
Right.
That's not always easy, I think, for many of
And
us.
you might not know. Yeah.
Yeah, 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 yeah. So I definitely think, like, especially the first couple of years of writing is like a really tricky learning process in all of this.
Absolutely.
And I mean, I think it's really amazing that you lucked out finding like a developmental editor and a copy editor you really liked early
Yeah.
on. It took me a while to find
Oh, really?
an editor that I really like gelled with, and like who was giving me what I wanted, and
Right.
seeing the dynamic. Like
Yeah.
I don't have like major complaints about the previous editors that I worked with, but they were like, um, they were very technically proficient, right?
Right.
But
Yeah.
they weren't offering me any suggestions to help me take my writing to the next level, which is
Right.
what I was looking for. And also kind of giving assessment on just sort of like consistency of characters,
Mm-hmm.
any feedback on kind of like, oh, you need a little bit more emotional oomph here or a little bit more, those
Right.
were kind of, so like I was looking for a bit of I didn't realize at the time, but I was looking for a bit of a combination of a little bit of developmental with the copy
With the
line.
little copy edit. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so then when I found an editor who does that and like is really perfect and gets my humor and all of my nerdy sci-fi references, I was like,
Right.
okay. And I told her, I was like, you can never leave, you
I know. Absolutely. Like they're
know.
amazing. They're like, yeah, and I don't know. Well, I found my editors because I think it was Lucy. I was reading Lucy
Hmm,
Lennox, one of Lucy
yeah,
Lennox's books, and
yeah.
I decided, I had written this first book and I looked in the copyright pages of her book. I was like, who does she use as an
Yes.
editor?
Yeah,
And I
right.
just called, emailed that same company and they are, I found a developmental editor through her and they're amazing. I mean, they're amazing. So,
Right. And I mean, I think that's a good tip too, for aspiring
absolutely.
people. Look in the copyright pages,
Yep.
books you like. You'll often find not only info about the editor, but also the cover
The
artist.
cover designer, yep.
Because that's,
And the photographer,
that's
yep. Yep.
right. So, I mean, these are just sort of tips of the trade that can be really
Oh
useful
yeah, because people had
going.
asked me, and I just said, well, yeah, just find, look at your favorite authors and just look in the front pages and see who's in
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
here.
But not everybody knows that. And it's, I mean,
Right?
this is a learning game. I mean, I spent probably 6 to 9 months doing extensive research on like self-publishing and like going
Oh,
into
really?
this genre because that again, this is part of my Clifton strengths sort of tendencies. And like I'm very high in the overall strategic category.
Oh,
And so
cool.
like four of my top five are
Huh.
all in the strategic category.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Yes.
I wish I had that because mine are all the relationship one. Are those the
Oh
green
my
ones?
gosh, so those are all at the bottom of my
Are they?
yes, yes, it's really funny. Yeah, we'll have to compare notes privately someday. But like, but I mean, I think sometimes it's like you try to maximize what you're best at,
Yeah.
right? And be aware of where your weaknesses and limitations are, and
Yeah.
that's where I usually try to get the feedback from other people. I was like, I know I'm not so hot on this. Like, help me out
Right.
with this to give me a reality check, essentially.
Right.
But yeah, well, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, so I know you write like hockey romance. Is that kind of like are you sort of like wedded to that specific niche or like do you write more broadly across contemporary or are there any other subgenres you are planning to delve into in the
To
future?
delve into someday. So, well, my first series wasn't hockey. My first series was
Oh, okay.
just a group of guys
Hmm.
who ran like a home renovations company. Like, and
Oh,
that was
sure,
my
sure.
first
Okay.
series, which
Yeah.
I loved those guys. I still love them. And I there's three main books in that series, and I have ideas for at least two more, but I don't know whether they'll ever come out or not. I've had a couple of requests for, side characters, like, are you ever going to write so and so's book?
Yeah.
Which I love. I love getting those requests, but sometimes I'm like, I don't know if I'm going to write his book or not. I don't know. But I did this hockey series. My most recent one is a hockey series, and I don't think I'm wedded to it. I have plans to keep writing it, but I find that sports is another thing that I got really interested in during the pandemic because I found
Sure.
low stress.
Okay.
And I've always kind of been growing up in Canada, hockey is just kind of part of the wallpaper.
Yeah.
And so my dad played, my brother played hockey,
Yeah,
my
yeah.
brother still plays beer league hockey. And so it's kind of part of the wallpaper. And I'm 51. And so girls my age, I think I knew of one girl during when I was growing up who played hockey. Like
Okay.
girls did figure skating or girls did,
Oh, sure.
ringette or something. But so I have never played hockey. But it was always there. And I'm a big fan now. And so I wanted to write this series but I also think sports is really interesting because it's kind of built in drama and built in things that people are interested in. You get like a little peek behind the curtain sometimes of,
Mm.
what goes on in the locker room. And, I've never been in a locker room, but I can imagine. So, and I can do research and, show
Yeah.
people what it might be like.
Right, right.
So,
Yeah.
but sports, I don't know. I think there's a lot there in sports. And I
Hmm.
find as someone, and I'm about the most unathletic person, I can barely catch a ball, like not for lack of trying, but I'm just terrible.
I'm with
But
you on
you
that
can
one.
still kind of feel like you can be part of it even if you can't catch a ball or stand up
Mm.
on skates and, you can still enjoy it for what it is.
Hey. Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think it's really fascinating. Like I've never personally been a big sports fan. I struggle to maintain interest. It's like, oh, if
Yeah.
it's on the TV, I would pull out a book, kind of thing.
Right.
Um, and so I generally just refer to them as sports ball of various
Sports ball.
varieties, right? And I've lived in places where like football's really huge
Hmm.
here, and I'm like, I couldn't tell
You just
you
don't care.
name
Yeah.
a player. Well, okay, now I know the guy who's dating Taylor Swift, but
Oh, Travis Kelce. Yeah.
but like, yeah, I mean, so I find it really fascinating, how this has become a new, really popular subgenre in romance more broadly, because it's in het romance as well as like
I find it
LGBT.
really fascinating. And the hockey, it's really interesting to me is the hockey. Like the hockey just seems like it's this king. And
It is, yeah, yeah,
hockey's
yeah.
not that big in this. I mean, I think it's growing in the US as opposed to in
Right.
Canada, but and I don't know if maybe that's why, like because people have not been so exposed to it or I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know either. I mean, my understanding of it is, and maybe it's a ratio thing. I believe, I could be wrong about this. There are quite a number of attractive hockey players. And not
There
always
are
the
a few.
same with
Yes.
like certain types of sports.
Yeah.
And hockey players don't, they also, it's a different kind of body type. Like you don't get almost like roided, bulked up
Yeah.
like you might in football or some, so like some of that. But I remember I went to one of my friends in high school was like a huge, oh gosh, I don't remember what team he was on, and he probably doesn't play anymore because of the age thing, but I believe his name was
Oh,
Sergey
no, I'm done.
Sergey Fedorov, maybe?
Shut up. Sergey Fedorov, really? No, he's a good
Yeah.
name.
So like, but he's like he was, I believe, a Russian
Yeah, he's
like.
from Russia. I
Okay,
don't know a
hockey
lot. Now
player.
I'm good, but he's a huge name, and I cannot even remember
Okay, I
who he
don't
played
know what
for.
team he was on, but this was like in the 90s, right?
Yep.
And she just had this massive like crush
I'm
mini
gonna look it up right now,
of
Chloe.
like she totally stan Sergey Fedorov, and I just remember because she mentioned his name so many times, and I'm like, okay, this is a sports person I remember,
Right? That's so funny.
but
Yeah,
like,
no,
yeah,
yeah. And so the hockey players they're kind of an interesting breed. And growing up in Canada, a lot of young boys, a lot of kids play hockey. And I think it's fewer kids now, but when I was growing up, almost all the guys that I
oh
used to
yeah,
know in
yeah,
high
yeah,
school played hockey at some level.
yeah,
And my nephew who lives up there now, he's graduating from high school this year, but he's played since he was a little kid, and it's
oh
just kind of
yeah.
part of the
Oh yeah, it's a huge part. I just find it fascinating that so many readers down here now are getting into it. I
yeah,
mean, I think like there has been a growth of like interest in professional hockey in the US, but yeah,
yeah,
but I think there's got to be something, there's got to be some special je ne sais quoi about it for romance
right.
readers, because it's not
Yeah.
like it's like a lot of men that are picking up hockey romances to read them. I
Yeah.
think there are some, but like in general. So yeah, no, I think that's really interesting. But like, so would you ever branch into like other genres though, like mystery romance or like paranormal or
Be really
fantasy sci-fi?
interesting. I think you and I were talking about a crazy like sports combined with paranormal
Oh
one
my
time.
God, yeah, I totally have this idea for like a paranormal hockey team.
I think that would be amazing. I think that would be we should talk about that. That would be so fun. I really do.
Like,
Because I
yeah, I mean,
think,
an actual kraken on ice. Like,
right? Would that not be hilarious?
so funny. Yeah,
I
it'd be,
would just, I just think that would be amazing and
yeah.
hysterical.
Yeah. Oh,
Um,
there's so much potential for that.
right? I just, your imagination could just go crazy. It
Oh,
would be
yeah.
so much fun. Um, and yeah, I think that, I haven't really thought about so and mystery. I love reading mysteries and action adventure, but I don't know if I'm I understand. I don't know if I'm smart enough to write that. Like I don't know if I could plan that out. And I'm not, I feel like if I know the ending, would think I would find it hard to write, not,
Ah,
and keep it a secret. I think I
yeah,
would
yeah.
find it hard to keep it a secret. I don't know. I haven't tried, but never say never,
Yeah, I mean, I know that there are some people who are pantsers that write mystery. I don't know how they do it, but
I don't know how you
a
do would
lot
do
of the
that.
people I know who write mystery are plotters.
Our
Like you
plotters.
kind of have,
Yeah.
to make it a really good mystery because you've got to lay
You have to lay the
breadcrumbs.
groundwork.
You've got to,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, and yeah, so, but it would involve a level of planning and organization that would like, I would plot it all out and then I'd be like, I don't want to write this now.
Right? Because you know what happens then, and then
Yeah,
it's
that's
boring.
that's
Yeah.
kind of how yeah, mostly like for me the writing process is like I need to know how it starts and very generally how it ends.
Right.
I may have the ideas too about some things that will happen along the way, but I don't know when
Right.
or how they're going to get there. I just
Yep.
really need to know the characters and the
Mhm.
world, and then that's when I start.
Yeah.
And
And certain ideas for scenes, that
yes,
you want to
yeah, yeah,
happen, but yeah.
yeah. And I tend to be somebody who, like, I will kind of very loosely, like, we're talking bullet point, like, very vaguely plan out the first couple of chapters. Here's kind of what I think, you know,
Right.
and then I'll start writing them, and it may or may not follow what I
Right.
put down.
Sometimes it goes in a totally different direction, and I always find that
Right,
fascinating.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And then I have to stop and I have to kind of figure out where does it go
Yeah.
from there. And I have learned about my process that sometimes I have to factor in time for
Yeah.
that I can't force it and I
You
can't
can't
always
force it.
see it immediately, right?
Yep.
I've also learned that for me, a way to like figure out what happens next often involves for me talking with
Oh,
someone else. So I've
yeah.
got a really good friend who is kind of a sometimes alpha reader for me, and I swear we kind of partly share a brain. Like she knows like what I think and my thought. So like I'll sort of say, okay, here's what's happened. I'm sort of stuck and like and we'll just like start talking and it will unblock me, right?
That's
In
cool.
terms of but again, that's something I didn't know right away. I had to learn as part of my process that I tend to be creatively inspired with dialogue, with
Right.
conversation with other people during
Yep.
my creative process. But not everybody, that's not everybody
And
how,
not everybody does it that way. It's really,
yeah,
yeah. As someone, and I learned recently, and I can't remember where, but that for people who are extroverts, that's really common, is
yeah,
to like process by talking to other people.
right, right.
And
Mm-hmm.
like you figure out what you think by talking to someone else,
Yes, yes, yeah.
And introverts are sort of the opposite. Like you
Mhm.
sort of take things away and ruminate on it by yourself, or cooks in your own brain by yourself before you really know what you think.
Right.
And that's much more me. Like I am much more, I need to think about it. So,
Right, right, right. Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's really important that everybody kind of figures that out for
yeah.
themselves. I know we're getting low on time here, so I want to like at least take a couple of minutes to talk about your upcoming release. Can you tell us a little bit more about it's the first book in a new series, right?
Yeah.
Called
So it came
Seattle
out.
Sasquatch?
Yeah, so the first book came out just on right after Christmas.
Oh,
And
okay.
then the second book I'm working on right now.
Nice.
But it's a series that follows it's kind of loosely based on the Seattle Kraken, which is the NHL's
Yeah.
newest expansion team.
Mhm.
Um and so we lived in Seattle for 10 years,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I'm a huge hockey fan, and when Seattle got a team, this I think is their fourth year in existence, but the news came down that Seattle was getting a team.
Mhm.
a couple years, 2 or 3 years before they actually showed up. And
Yeah.
so because I'm such a huge fan and we had a lot of friends who were really excited about it, we ended up buying season tickets for the Kraken. And then we
Mm.
ended up moving twice now, and we still
Ah.
have these season tickets. But so I have followed the Kraken, and I really love that organization, the real life organization.
Yeah,
They
yeah,
are,
yeah.
they're very progressive as, a
Mhm.
Seattle, they're very progressive.
Yeah.
They are the first NHL team to hire a female coach. They have a female assistant
Mhm.
coach, which is,
That's
amazing.
awesome.
And
Yeah.
they have like female on-air analysts on their
Mm.
broadcasts and stuff like that, which is like I
Yeah.
just think it's fantastic and amazing because women's
Yeah.
hockey is also growing. I mean,
Oh,
there's
yeah,
lots of potential
sure.
there too for
Yeah.
creativity as well. I mean,
Oh,
women's
yeah.
hockey is huge.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, so the book two, so this series follows the Sasquatch, not the Kraken. And so it's just, the first book is like a hurt comfort on a guy who has kind of a tragic backstory, and the
Mm.
team captain, and the team is sort of the way an expansion team works in real life NHL is that each team that exists already is allowed to protect a certain number of their players. So when the
Mm.
new team comes in, they can select a certain number of players from each team of the
Okay.
guys who they have not chosen to protect.
Ah.
And so whenever a new team comes in, I think, it's a little bit of a band of ragtags. Like these are guys who may have a chip on their shoulder a little bit because their old team chose to leave them open to
Mm.
being taken by the new team. And um, so I think there's guys that may have things to prove to the world about, well, they didn't think I was good enough to keep, so I'm gonna show that, um,
Yeah.
and competition. And so that's the first book is a kind of a hurt comfort, and then the second book is going to be this story between two goalies, which is something I thought would be really fun because when I lived in Vancouver growing up, and they ended up getting into a situation, the Vancouver hockey team, where they had two really, really amazing goaltenders.
Okay.
And typically on a pro team, you have like a starting goalie who's the number one guy, and then you have his backup, who's usually like he
Mm.
doesn't play as many games. He's kind of there in case, or if they have games 2 days in a row, usually the backup will take the second game. But he's usually a younger kind of guy who's developing, who is not ready to be the team's number one yet. Like the quarterback,
Right.
it's a little different than being a quarterback on a football team because quarterbacks usually start every game, but
Right.
goalies in hockey in NHL, they start most, but they don't start all. They give the backup more time.
Right.
So I thought, well, what would happen, in Vancouver, what happened when in the 90s was they ended up with these two guys who were good enough to be the starter. And then it became, well, what are we going to do? Because there's really only room for one starter.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
started thinking when I was writing this series, what would happen if they were together? Like there's
I
all
love
kinds of
it.
like
That's
relationship
all
stuff,
you need, the kernel of a what if.
right? Yeah, well, that would be really interesting. So
I love it. I
yeah, so that'll be their story. And then I have, there's lots of fodder for the sports world. There's a lot of drama that goes on in sports, and
right.
couched
Well,
in anger and violence. So,
right, right. When it lends itself to a series because
totally.
you've got multiple players. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, that I
Yeah.
think that's great.
But one of my
Um,
girlfriends was saying, one of my few girlfriends in real life who, knows what I write and everything. And she's like, well, are you going to have a whole hockey team of gay guys? She's like, I don't know. I'm like, well, I got to figure out how that's going to work. I'm not sure
right,
yet.
right, right. But I could be lured in to the first all gay male hockey
Right?
team romance series, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally.
Make them also paranormal. Yes, and I
Right. And there we go. We have a winner.
I
Yeah.
could be okay with aliens too. Like
Right?
but
That would be so cool. I do. I think there's like so much potential for
oh
that.
yeah, no, for real. And like the market is really, primed for yeah, yeah, yeah. So I mean, I think there's yeah. You too could write, something
Right.
for
Anything
this.
you can dream of. Yeah.
Right. Oh yeah, the sky's the limit, man. Um Well, we're nearly out of time, so I always like to make sure. I mean, this always flies by faster than you
It
think.
does, yeah.
But I like to chat with authors at the very end to kind of give my listeners and their readers a little sneak peek at what's ahead for you. You mentioned you were working on the second book in this series. Can you tell us a little bit about what's coming from Harper later this year?
Yeah, so so the audiobook for book one will be coming out
Exciting.
potentially I'd probably end of February, beginning of March. And
Okay.
so the narrators, I'm super excited. So I have one audiobook, but this will be kind of the first series that I'm making
Oh,
into
nice.
audio. But so Kevin Earlywine and Declan Winters are the
Oh,
narrators
nice.
for Rylan, which is the first book. So I'm really excited about that.
Very good.
Yeah, so they're going to be starting in the next week or so, I think, doing their recording. So that's going to be great. And then I actually just found out that my first series, I was approached by an audiobook publisher, so they're gonna produce the first series in audio.
Nice.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about that. I don't know when that's gonna happen yet, but
Okay.
hopefully at some point that will be happening, which is exciting.
Neat.
And then I'm gonna write, I'd like to have the first four or of the Sasquatch series out in 2025. It seems kind of ambitious. I don't know whether that will happen or not. There'll be probably at least the first three.
Oh,
So there'll
great.
be the Goalie story, Louis story, and then book three is going to be sort of an enemies to lovers trope,
Oh,
which I
okay.
have not written before. So that'll be interesting.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
so that'll be good. But I have some signings coming up this year too.
Oh,
I'm gonna
great.
do the Toronto. I'm gonna be in Toronto twice. So
Neat.
once in May and
Oh,
once
yeah.
in August, I think is the Northern Rainbow one again.
Yeah.
And then I'm doing the Rainbow Readers Cruise in August, which is
Neat.
really fun.
It's so fun. I did it last year for their first year and it was great.
It
Yeah.
isn't, it's so much fun. Are you gonna do it this year too?
I am not this year because I'm doing Shimmer and Rare in the
Oh,
UK and
oh, that's
uh
amazing.
pricey
Yes.
trip. So I've already talked with Joel and Rich. I'll be coming back in 2026.
Oh, that's exciting. Yeah, so I'm gonna do it this year too because it was really fun. I mean, got to meet some amazing people and
Oh yeah.
I loved getting to meet, authors that I'm still kind of in awe of. Like I met Nora Phoenix there too, and I love her writing. So I'm really excited to go back and yeah,
Yeah.
so it's gonna be a busy year, but I think I'm excited about
No, it
a
sounds great. It sounds like you've
yeah.
got a lot of good stuff in the pipeline. And, I think the most important thing is to keep enjoying what you're doing. Right.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, we have a weird 4 years ahead of us politically. And so, we need to suck up as much good stuff as we can, I think.
Right. Right.
So,
I think trying to bring readers joy,
yeah, a little bit of
the
escape.
escape
That's
for a
kind of
month.
always what I hope for is like, escape the real world for a little bit, find a
Right.
little joy and, just,
Likewise. Yep.
yep. Yep.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us,
Thank
Harper.
you.
I will include information on how listeners can check out more about Harper and her
Awesome.
books in the show notes. And until next time, thanks everyone. We'll see
Thank
you
you.
later.
Thanks. Bye.